Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to cover sections 3.4 and 3.5 from your textbook. And in section 3.4, we just wanted to describe the structure of the nucleus and its role in the storage place of genetic information, as well as explain the role and location of the ribosomes. So probably most of you know that eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. Remember, prokaryotic cells don't. And the nucleus, you can see it from using a light microscope, the kind of microscopes we would use in a teaching lab. And that nucleus contains the genetic information. And most of you know that the primary genetic material is DNA. It's a nucleic acid. So it's going to tell the cell how to make proteins. I guess the main thing I want you to know, structure of the nucleus and its role in the storage of genetic information. Yeah, and when you look at the nucleus, so here's a cell, there's a nucleus inside. Looks like there's a little thing inside there too, and that's actually called a nucleolus, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But there's the nucleus that stores the chromosomes. But a couple of the vocabulary words can be confusing because you'll see a picture like this, and it says it has chromatin. Chromatin is DNA and protein, but it's the chromosomes all kind of stretched out. When a cell goes to divide, the chromatin shortens up and we call it chromosomes because we can see them with special microscopy techniques. So chromatin and chromosomes are pretty much the same thing. They're just in different formations. So the chromatin, the chromosomes. And it talks a little bit about it there. One of the things that you want to know about chromosomes, remember we said the chromosomes are the DNA in your cells, and DNA is the instructions on how to make all the proteins. So we don't need to make all of our proteins at the same time. And here it tells you that the chromosomes, there's genes on the chromosomes. So these pieces of DNA, the chromosomes, are divided into sections called genes, and one gene is enough DNA to encode for a protein. We're going to do a section where we talk more about DNA and we'll expand on that idea. The other structure I wanted you to be familiar with are ribosomes. And again, this is something you've learned in another class somewhere along the line, but ribosomes are organelles. They're composed of proteins and ribosomal RNA, but that's not that important for what we're doing. What is important is the ribosomes are where proteins are made. And that's really important because remember, living things are mostly protein. Your skin's got a lot of protein, your hair, your muscles, your bones, everything's got a lot of protein in it. So we use our DNA to make RNA. RNA goes to the ribosomes, and that's where proteins are made. And again, we'll talk about that DNA to RNA to protein thing later on. But what you want to remember is the ribosomes are where proteins are made. And it talks here about endoplasmic reticulum and all that. But the bottom line is, if I go back up to this picture, ribosomes are, they're kind of scattered around the cell. There's a lot on some of the endoplasmic reticulum. I'm not going to ask you about that per se, but in some of the diagrams you can see it's called rough ER. You can also see ribosomes floating around in the cytoplasm, but one thing you notice about cells is there's lots and lots of ribosomes. All these yellow dots are supposed to be ribosomes, and there's ribosomes floating all around inside the cell too. So ribosomes and the fact that cells make proteins are really important. Let's see. Yeah, that video is probably a little more detailed than what you need. And then the last organelle I wanted to talk about are the lysosomes. And again, if we look at a cell, sometimes we'll see these little structures. They're just little membrane-bound structures called lysosomes. And the simplest way to remember a lysosome is lys means to break, and lysosomes have enzymes in them that break up molecules. Some people refer to the lysosomes as the garbage disposal of a cell. And so you can read that little section about how lysosomes decompose. They can break down bacteria that's in our body, or they can break down old cell parts. And this is just a nice little video showing you that. There's a disease called Tay-Sachs disease, and you might hear about this disease when you talk about genetics. But Tay-Sachs disease, a normal function when a baby is born, they actually have a lot more brain cells, a lot more neurons than they do later on. And one of the things that happens is as in their early, year of their life, that there's a lot of weeding out of things in the baby's brain. And there's a lot of lipids that are taken out of the brain and cells that are removed to help the brain function normally. And a disease called Tay-Sachs disease, that doesn't happen because of a certain enzyme is not present in lysosomes. And so it doesn't do this weeding out in the infant's brain. And in the first year of life, the baby will get to a point that they start to appear like they're going backwards and losing functions. So Tay-Sachs disease is just a terrible genetic disease. Fortunately, it's not very common, but it is something that a baby will ultimately die from. Let's see, I'm going to go to section 3.5 and talk a little bit about, in particular, I just want to talk about flagella and cilia. Doesn't mean these other things aren't important. It's just we don't have time for everything. When we talk about some of the organs in the system or the organ systems, we're going to mention cilia and flagella. Cilia, we'll do flagella first since there's a picture here. Most of you are familiar with the flagella is like kind of a long tail. The only human cells that have flagella are sperm cells, and they allow the cell to swim. Now, when you talk about microbiology, a lot of bacteria also have flagella, and it allows them to swim. Cells that have cilia have lots of hair-like structures on their surface, not just one, but lots of hair-like structures, and they generally are shorter than flagella. And instead of making the cell move in human cells, the cell stays still and the cilia move. And it helps in the respiratory tract, it helps mucus move along the surface of the cells. In the reproductive tract, in the female reproductive tract, it helps the egg move into the uterine tubes or into the fallopian tubes. So when a woman ovulates, cilia help move the egg to the appropriate place. Another important thing with cilia, when people smoke, it actually paralyzes the cilia in the lungs and prevents movement of mucus. And so it's the reason why a lot of smokers have smoker's cough, because when they're sleeping, mucus will accumulate in their lungs, and then they wake up in the morning and the coughing does what the cilia would have done in somebody that had healthy cilia. If you stop smoking, your cilia can recover. So another reason to stop smoking. I'm going to stop there and I'll do one more video in this chapter.